what's up, YouTube? We're going to be watching a video called How Gacha Games Keep You Playing. This is a really interesting topic to me, so I am excited to see what is going on in here. Come join us if you'd ever like to on twitch.tv/HexJuice, where we film these live and do a lot of other stuff. Gameplay, goofing, gaffing, jailkin, all kinds of stuff. Coming to Twitch does, in fact, make your pee-pee bigger. It gives you extra riz and makes you handsomer and smarter, so you should try it sometime. Anyway, let's go ahead and get into the video. Subscribe.
One does not simply play gacha games.
How gacha games keep you playing. Immediate just ass shot from Nikkei. Got it.
Gacha games play you. I'm sure a lot of people have heard about the predatory practices of these games. Limited time events or characters, fear of missing out, obscure pricing, and so on.
Yeah.
But how true is that? Well, today...
Immensely. 100% and entirely true. 100%. Some are worse than others, but it is very true. I mean, mobile games in general like that too, though. It's not just gacha. If you played Candy Crush for any amount of time, you know that these kind of practices are also in Candy Crush, because the beautiful thing about marketing this way on the phone is that it's pretty easy to do purchases and it doesn't feel very real if you just have to, like, you know, double tap your power bar or whatever and then you pay for it. Like, it's very easy to get people to just pay and it doesn't feel very real.
Allow me, a psych major, to chime in, which is, by the way, one of the most useless degrees in college ever, but at least...
True! As a person with a psych degree currently, this could not be any more true. It is the most useless degree. It is a degree so that you can get more degrees, and that is it. Most people who get psych degrees never end up working in the realm of psychology at all. I.e., case in point, I am now an anime girl on the internet.
I get to make this video.
Unless you want to be a therapist or like 3 other professions, and that is it. And also if you just really like school.
I'm going to show you all the psychological tactics I can think of in which gacha games employ to retain and keep you playing.
Okay.
At this point, I've reviewed several gacha games, and I've even started out this channel going over one in particular. Hopefully at the end of this video, you will understand the many nuances of these predatory game practices and know how to take precautions to not get yourself trapped in the hands of these developers. My name is Psyche. Let's get started. First, let's establish some expectations.
Okay.
By its core, gacha games, and by extension live service games, have 2 primary goals in mind. To have players play the game for as long as possible, and spend as much money as possible. But this makes sense if you think about it. As part of the player base, you would want your game's popularity to grow, and want to keep the developers within good financial status so that they can continue to make meaningful updates to the game you enjoy. I am also one to believe that the monetization and retention techniques don't have to be abusively implemented. One expectation I do have, which I understand some people may have critiques about, is endgame optimization.
Nikkei is so crazy to me. Just the visuals of Nikkei just like it sort of shorts my brain out, and I feel like I can't function when I see it.
In a gacha game, this is handled by one of 2 ways. The first is by making endgame upgrades very grindy, taking up resources that may take a while to obtain. This approach guarantees progression, albeit very slowly at a time. You know that farming every little resources gets you closer to that final upgrade, and that is progression on your account. The light is at the end of the tunnel. You just have to get there. The second approach is by...
Well, the problem is that there is it's not well designed when there is a light at the end of the tunnel. Because I think Genshin originally did sort of have that strategy where you were trying to get to the light at the end of the tunnel. But the problem with Genshin is that there was actually an end of the tunnel. You got to the light, and then they have to have like a different strategy to keep you in, because all of those upgrades and stuff kind of ended up being nothing when you could just blast all of the end game content no matter what you had, because your characters were already strong enough.
Implementing an RNG gearing system. This will be your artifacts in Genshin. By making endgame progression chance-based, players won't know how close they are to their desired late-game build, since anything can happen with any given artifact. The advantage with this system is that you could get lucky, and instantly be able to get a viable piece of gear on your first try. But the disadvantage...
But probably not. It's probably going to roll off flat defense and flat HP and maybe flat attack.
As you may have guessed, is that you could farm for weeks or even months and not get what you want.
Making
progression an all-or-nothing scenario. I do expect either of these systems to be in place for any given gacha game. The question is, how well is it implemented? I try these games because some of them are pretty fascinating. I think for whatever reason, gacha games are home to some of the best storytelling. The
Fate Go is not a good example of good storytelling in gacha. Sometimes people will say things and then flash footage on screen, and I don't know if it's because they think that footage is representative of the things that they're saying, but Fate Go is not an example of like impeccable storytelling. I also think that most gacha storytelling is like pretty mid. I actually like the process of grinding in gacha games. Like that process of grinding and then getting to finish a new piece of content is like really satisfying for me. It's the kind of more or less the same reason why Elden Ring is my favorite game ever, is because you have to like grind it out, work really hard, get all of your upgrades and all that stuff, and then you get to like eventually finish content that is challenging. And that for me is why I like gacha games. It's kind of why I like Pokemon too, was like strategizing and making things better. For me, it's really rewarding to build the characters, because ultimately that's kind of the point, because the characters are what you wish for, in my opinion.
Loops are simple, and unlike traditional live services, it's quite easy to jump into and play, considering most are mobile games and require relatively little maintenance. So for a bit of disclaimer, I tend to be a bit more skeptical when it comes to playing and reviewing gacha games. But that doesn't mean that gacha games can't be fun. In my early YouTube days, I played indie roguelikes, which was a far cry from the content I cover today. In case you're wondering why my gacha reviews always seem to be in the 7 or 8 out of 10 mark, this is because having gacha mechanics in a game, in my opinion, is already predatory in nature. No matter how good the story, sound design, or lore are, a gacha game cannot receive a 10 out of 10 rating. It just feels rather disgraceful to compare it to something like Elden Ring or Baldur's Gate 3.
I think that this makes sense if you are rating all genres of games on the same kind of scale. Like, I agree. You can't, it is kind of disrespectful to rate a game like Elden Ring against any gacha game. It doesn't matter which one. I think it might be nice to rate a gacha game on a gacha game scale and then like an overall video game scale. I think a lot of games are not really comparable. Like, I don't think that you compare turn-based games to open world games. Like, it's kind of like comparing like a fruit and a plastic toy. I do agree to a certain extent that like a gacha game is never going to be a 10 out of 10, because the reality is that gacha games are live service games. You're not just rating them on the game itself and how it plays. I think overall, yeah, no gacha game is going to compare to like a fully fledged video game, because ultimately the point is gambling, and they make pain points in gacha games to get you to spend money. Live service to live service, I think, is more fair, but live service to sort of insulated story games is not really a fair comparison. I don't think they should be compared, and I don't think they are comparable.
Now, don't get me wrong, I find gacha games to be fun and interesting, but the vast majority of the time, the maximum I will grade a gacha game will be an 8 out of 10, which already means that I think it's very good. The reason I don't bring up these commonly used tactics in reviews is that we become desensitized to them since every gacha game is doing it. I know it's there, I know the nature of live service games must have some measures of player retention in place, and I know these games need consistent funding to continue its development.
But that's true, again, of like every live service game, not just gacha games. Any live service game, especially mobile games, do have to do this. And that doesn't make it more okay or less okay or whatever. It's still predatory. We can still acknowledge it as that. Every live service game, to a certain extent, does need to have these tactics in place, because the player retention is kind of the only thing. It is the most important thing. The nice thing about gacha games, especially as mobile games, is that typically gacha games don't have as much advertisements that you have to watch, because they have their internal gacha systems, even though they're free to play. Whereas a lot more like mobile games that are not gachas are going to make you watch ads like all the fucking time, unless you pay to not watch ads. Something is bothering me a bit about this point. I just can't quite put my finger on it.
But I also believe that there are ways to monetize and retain players well, and ways that are not so well. I find myself having more fun in these games if you know what they're trying to do. And now I'm going to explain exactly what those predatory systems are and how you can better take care of yourself as a player.
Sure.
Even if there's no clear solution to combating some of these practices, I think just knowing what they're doing can help you see things more clearly.
Being informed as a consumer makes you a better consumer. Who would have thought that?
Let's start with how gacha games tend to time gate your progression. Have you ever wondered what kind of activity in the game gets you the most amount of XP or progression points while taking the least amount of time to do?
Yeah.
Well, let's take Wuthering Waves as a recent example. Following the footsteps of its popular predecessor, you'll notice that the two actions that will grant the most amount of XP on a routine basis are daily quests, which gives a whopping 2,000, and spending wave plates, which is in the hundreds mark for each dungeon run.
Yeah.
While story and side quests can grant you quite a big amount sometimes, they cannot be repeated. Now, you could
Thank you for the primer, I appreciate it.
explore the open world, solving puzzles and opening chests for meager amounts of XP like an absolute plebeian, or you can just spend around 10 minutes of your day doing dailies and spending your wave plates to get over easily 3,000 XP right then and there. Pretty sweet deal.
Yeah.
This trend is not exclusive to Wuthering Waves, as a lot of other games I've played also do the same.
I thought that said a hamster's masturbation.
This trend is not
exclusive
to Wuthering.
I thought that says a hamster's masturbation, and I was like, what are you doing in these games? A hamster's what? The hamster did what? But no, it's maturation. Maturation, that's different. Sorry. Squirrel, sorry.
Wuthering Waves, as a lot of other games I've played also do the same, where spending the time replenishable resource tends to grant the most XP, and what do you know? You can get more of these resources using real money.
Yes.
If you look up any guides on how to progress faster, a pattern for most gacha games is to tell you to log in every day, do your dailies, spend your resin, wave plate, AP, whatever it is, and repeat. From a time efficiency standpoint, this makes perfect sense.
Yes.
But you can probably see the implications of having daily missions as your main source of progression. They're dailies, meaning it would require you to log in every day.
If you want the best progression, absolutely, yes, you do have to log in every day. Gacha games are not really meant to be like full-time games. They're not really meant to be games that you can play for several hours every day. They are really meant to be something that is like upkept until there's interesting updates. Granted, some games are much worse about this, where there's like you log in for your dailies and then you have like fuck all to do until an update. You have like 4 days of content and then you're just like dead for another like 4 weeks. Not a lot of games really are main games, you know? Like a lot of main games are going to be more your competitive stuff. Making a single player game in general a main game is like incredibly difficult. To have enough content for something like that, it's like it's very difficult. What a lot of gacha players do is they just sort of log in for all of their dailies for all of their games, and they have sort of a rotation of chores for that. Some people will do 1 or 2 at a time, but the reality about gacha for the most part is they are not meant to be a game that they play daily for multiple hours. It's supposed to only be something that you play for a certain amount of time. I think Wuthering Waves can be better with that because you have more things to do in the open world. I think the exploration is very good, but it just depends. I think that this is more so just about like the gacha genre, and some people want more from their games and some people want their games to be their main games, and unfortunately like gacha is just not really for that.
Even if it's just for short bursts at a time. Add in some level requirements for quests and other types of character progression, and you have a system to encourage daily logins in order for meaningful progress to be made. This goes into habit formation, which is a point I'll bring up later. But for now, let's take a look at another retention technique. Live service games need a steady stream of new content to keep newer and existing players engaged. They can do this in one of 2 ways. The first is by actually making frequent and substantial content updates within a reasonable time frame.
Substantial in quotation marks for sure, especially when we're using Genshin as the visual example.
You can say whatever you want about Genshin, but their team has been stellar with content schedules and new events. You're constantly engaged with events or minigame modes, and the time to completion feels fair and reasonable. The second option on the
I disagree. Using a jigsaw puzzle is like an example of like this like super sick, cool, like awesome, these updates. Like I think they keep on schedule. They do in fact release content at their regular schedule, and they have for years. That's great. But like substantial and satisfying and engaging, maybe sometimes, not most of the time though.
On the other hand, is by simply increasing the grind or the amount of time needed to get to the late game or the completion state, such as what FGO has done over the past year or so, by introducing append and servant coin upgrades, as well as making events 3 weeks instead of 2, in order to artificially increase the grind without actually providing significant new content. It doesn't take a genius to figure out the latter is much easier to do than the former. The Battle Pass,
it also makes the game like way crappier. Fate Go is relatively dead, to be honest. It makes the game substantially crappier to just sort of artificially inflate stuff. A lot of games are really guilty of this, which is also, like, there's kind of another version of this where they kind of just inflate, like, the health and damage that bosses do with the new updates, but they don't really, like, add anything that more substantial. They just sort of make it a harder and harder sort of damage check without any, like, new real mechanics or anything all that interesting, which is a problem that I have with Honkai Star Rail right now. And, like, I don't think that that is really good, like, solid, meaningful updates either. Fate Go suffers and is not as popular of a game because it's lazy, and that's a lazy balancing way to keep people in the game.
It's also a popularized retention technique, but luckily in the gachas I've seen, they typically don't take long to do, which should be the case anyways. Most missions can be done by naturally doing your events or dailies. Compared to some live service games out there, the time to completion is way shorter. Now, I generally don't have a problem with these types of progression. The short daily grind allows someone to realistically enjoy the game extremely casually on the side. Yeah. This is a trend for the games I've reviewed, but for the main thing,
most gachas are tuned toward more casual players. It's sort of like a choose your own adventure of how hardcore you'd like to be or how in-depth you'd like to be. If you pay more money, you have an easier time. If you pay less money, you have a harder time, but everybody is more or less eventually going to be able to do all of the content.
Things I look for is how natural or how easy it is to progress. A common trend is by complicating progression by introducing a large and diluted pool of currencies and resources to keep track of. Some games still do have a lot of currencies, but they're usually grouped up in a list, or only used when you perform certain actions. I'll show an example of this done pretty atrociously. I'm currently playing Honkai Impact III, and this game has some of the most convoluted currency systems I've seen in a gacha game.
I'm going to be honest, I know that people really care about that game. I could not get past the tutorial of Honkai Impact. I think I did that little, like, beginning mission on some spaceship and was like, yeah, I don't think this is for me. I didn't try to get into Honkai Impact 3rd until I was already playing Genshin, and comparatively, it just didn't really, like, it wasn't really giving.
Modes take different tickets to enter, shops have so many currencies that you don't know how much it actually costs, and hardly any of it is explained to newer players.
Yeah. The more mobile gamey the gacha is, the more this is true. I think the more the game is geared toward being playable on PC and mobile, the less this is true.
Next up are monetization tactics. The most obvious one is the obfuscation of the cost per gacha summon. As you know, most polls in gacha games use their dedicated currency, but the amount used per poll is often not an even number. There's Genshin's classic 160. I've seen 130, 180, 200, 280, 300, and so on. Of course, each step that the player will have to convert real money to gacha currency hides the actual amount of money spent. So you lose track of how much your shiny waifu or husbando actually cost.
That's true.
If the amount per summon was, for example, 100 gems, and then I asked you, quick, how many gems per 7 pulls? Oh, 700.
700! Easy. I know math.
But if it was 160 gems per pull, and I asked you the same, suddenly you have to do one more calculation. You gotta use your head a little bit.
I can't do that math.
It doesn't help that the majority of gacha currency packs are listed in off amounts, not in even purchases that equate to a certain amount of pulls. So
this is, again, worse for specifically app-oriented gacha games, in my opinion. The more on the PC it is, the more it's made for, like, being more of a game and less of a gacha, the less this is a problem. Cookie Run Kingdom is a great example of this. Cookie Run Kingdom is indisputably meant to be a mobile-focused game for mobile game players that are not trying to get into too complicated of a gaming experience. And it has about 1 trillion different currencies that cost different amounts of money at its ass.
So in the human cognitive processes, we use our brains in one of 2 ways. There's System 1, which is the fast, automatic process, and System 2, which is the slower, more deliberate way of thinking. If I asked you, what's 2 plus 2? Well, unless
5.
your name is O'Brien, you would have thought of 4 immediately. You didn't need to think about that. If I showed you a box of donuts and I said, hey, pick one, you got 5 seconds to decide. Then you might pick your favorite one, such as the chocolate one, or the plain one, or the sprinkle one. You don't necessarily need a
I think the booger-colored one looks really good. I want that one.
reason to pick a donut.
That's what my fast brain thought.
When you do these actions, you're using the System 1 way of thinking. Automating these processes are helpful in everyday life. Of course, if we gave a thought to every single action we did, it would be very inefficient. On the other hand, certain decisions you make in life, such as which college to go to, which job offer to accept, we would often have to sit down, weigh the pros and cons, and really think about it.
Yeah.
This is System 2 at work. A general rule of thumb, we hate using System 2 because we actually have to use our heads. This is especially seen in present days, where social media sites like TikTok and Twitter promote a constant stream of stimulation to keep you hooked. Don't think, just consume. Mindless consumerism is a topic that would probably
I think we're mixing concepts here a little bit, and this is a nitpicky thing that I don't think anybody cares about, so I'm not going to get too far into it. A lot more of that like fast zoomer brain like TikTok thing is more about quick dopamine. It's not so much about not wanting to think. It's a very big concept that we're kind of condensing into this like other smaller concept that is like sort of tangentially related, but not nearly as much as you would like. And like really a lot more of that is about like quick dopamine and like moving on kind of thing, because the more your brain is attuned to that like quick dopamine hit, like the less you do use that system 2 thinking, it does make consuming easier. But like we're putting one concept where really it's like a bunch of different concepts together, and it sort of waters down the use of that concept, in my opinion. Again, nitpicky psychology nerd take.
Way longer to dive into, and a topic that's not necessarily related to this video, nor do I have the knowledge to go over it.
Fair.
But this is a problem that's very prevalent in the present day. This is exactly something that gacha games' cousin, casinos, try to exploit. By obfuscating the cost of the gambling currency, you lose track of how much you actually spent. And if you don't get what you want, especially if you're in the heat of the moment, you're not thinking, okay, so I need to spend this much money to guarantee the item I want. Instead, you're thinking, I want this, and I need to spend more money to get it. How much? I don't know, and I don't care.
Do you guys feel like this is true when you're fiending? Because I think that this is a lot more related to like the FOMO tactics. I feel like this is a lot more related to dopamine and like gambling addiction surrounding topics. Like I think people typically know how much they spent. They just feel like it's worth it in that moment. When I had really big problems with like impulse control and gacha games, I was very much aware of what I was spending in the moment because I was like fiending. It didn't, like, it felt worth it, which is a lot more of like a kind of a dopamine addiction-y sort of like gambling is addictive problem. I agree with the point that they purposely obfuscate how much money you spend. That happens all over the place. On Twitch, you have bits, you know, where it kind of does the same thing. I don't think that people completely lose track of how much money they spend unless they're really deep into like real bad gambling addiction. But like, again, this is sort of like mixing points to me. Again, psychology student nitpicking bullshit.
But I need to spend money until I get it.
Yeah.
The best way I can mitigate this is by calculating roughly around how much gacha currency I need in order to guarantee the results you want. Remember, casinos and by extension gacha games don't want you to think. It is to their advantage for you to mindlessly consume and spend money until you get what you want. The one trump card you have as a gacha player is the pity system. This is, in my opinion, the main differentiator between classifying gacha games as gambling or not. You can't pity a jackpot on a slot machine, but you can guarantee your 2D waifu here. For example, in Genshin, I generally try to save enough to fully reach pity to guarantee one copy of my desired character. When I pulled for Chloride, I had around 27,000 Primogems.
I don't understand the hype behind this character. Maybe it's because I don't know what like the story elements behind her were, but I thought she looks like mid. I don't find her all that appealing. I feel like there's just better waifus. She kind of looks, yeah, I would agree. She kind of does look like a little bit of a 4-star. I've seen her animations. They were fine. Like, they were cool, but like, I guess I didn't understand the like, you know, that was like behind this character. Chlorine. But again, I think that the concepts that we are talking about here are a lot more it's a lot more about like manipulating your dopamine and FOMO and stuff like that. It has a lot more to do with like trying to get people actively addicted to the gambling in gacha games. The trying to get you not to think. I think that has more to do with like lacking that impulse control, like getting you to not have that impulse control, getting you to sort of like have that like sort of like addictive fiending for the rolling. And it has a lot less to do with specifically this like manners of thinking concept that we're talking about right now.
If you do some rough calculations, A round of pity is around 80 pulls, so multiplied by the 160 Primo Gems per pull, that's around 12,800.
Yeah.
But in case I lose the 50-50, times that by 2 and I get around 25,000. In this scenario, I am guaranteed to get at least one copy of Chloride. Meaning, I can't get enticed by my impulsive behavior to spend money because it will never reach that point. For the record, if a gacha game does not have a pity system, and believe me, there still are these days, then the section where I review monetization will instantly get a failing grade. I generally judge the game by the generosity of the gacha currency given and the rates that a player can realistically obtain new items as a casual. Another subtle practice is the use of a free daily pack found in the cash shop. Whenever you log in every day, there will be a red notification button next to the shop, which you can go in and claim your daily free goodies. Now, the idea for this one is that
this is a big mobile game thing. There's also going to be your daily login bonuses on, again, more PC, like more PC-er, like less mobile-y games. And those, usually it's just something that splashes up on your screen when you log in. There's not as much daily free stuff. Usually the daily free stuff is sort of locked behind like your daily missions and stuff like that. But yeah, Cookie Run Kingdom definitely does have that. Yeah. Mobile gachas, like uber mega, like mobile focused gachas, because some gachas do go on PC, but they're like more for mobile players. Mobile gachas do this really badly. There are also like daily login bonuses, but you do have to pay for those as well.
When you're in an environment where you're expected to buy things, you're more likely to spend money. Of course, in a virtual environment, this can be a bit different, but the idea is the same.
Right.
Path to Nowhere actually does something pretty sneaky here, where they put the free pack on the right side of the cash shop, so you have to scroll through all the paid stuff in order to see it. Not only that, one can easily defend this by saying, well, at least it's better than nothing. You're still getting a bit of free extra goodies every day, so you should still...
Gacha players love saying that. Better than nothing is like a gacha player's catchphrase. It's like their favorite thing to say, I think. It's like that I hear that so often. I agree with the premise of a lot of what he's saying, but first of all, making this like a gacha specific problem is, I think, a little bit unfair. I think that these are things that are more about like live service and mobile games, because usually live service games are free to play. A free to play game does have to force monetization more aggressively, regardless of if it's gacha or like Candy Crush. COD does this. League of Legends does some of this stuff too. Like, it's like it's everywhere. You have a similar thing with Valorant where you have to log in every day to see if they brought back the skin that you really wanted that you didn't get, you know? Was the blah blah battle in my shop today? I have to check. I'm not going to play Valorant literally at all today, but I got to make sure and check and see if the blood vandal is there because I missed it, and every day without it is just suffering. Like, the FOMO stuff is in everything. It's in free-to-play games, and it's more of a live service issue, some of these like nitpicky ones. Obviously, the gacha part of gacha systems is kind of the worst of it, but this is everywhere. I guess it's still good to point out so that you see it, but it's everywhere.
You'll be grateful for it. You see, we're defending predatory practices one step at a time. Now, here's something...
Wait.
You see, a bit of free extra goodies every day, so you should still be grateful for it. You see, we're defending predatory practices one step at a time.
So what he said is that they make you scroll through all of the other stuff so that you're grateful for the free thing you got. I feel like that's like a bit of a stretch. I'm just gonna, I think it's more so like trying to get you to see everything that's in the shop.
Now, here's something dangerous that some live service games might try on you. Remember System 1 and 2? Well, let's go back to that college application example. If you were offered to be accepted into 2 different colleges, you will likely have to research the backgrounds and suitability of your choice, since it is a pretty big choice in one's life. But let's change this.
I think he's saying the better than nothing. I guess regardless, the better than nothing part of this is not really that accurate, is also better than nothing. But I think a lot of it is more so to be like, well, if you have the currency, you can do more things. And look, you have to look at all the currency options to scroll. It's very cool. I'll be honest, I didn't really understand the gacha of Genshin and why it was so interesting until I got a 5-star. And granted, I even got catching, which was not the greatest 5-star. But when I got my first 5-star and then I saw her go ching, 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 when she did her ultimate, I was like, oh, I'm going to spend money now. I think it's more so about like, if you get a taste, you're more likely to spend than if you got no taste of like the benefits of that
scenario a little bit. What if you are given 2 offers, same as before, but both colleges send you an urgent email? If you don't accept the offer in 5 minutes, then both offers will be rescinded. Uh-oh, now we're running into a problem. You need to decide now. You can't rely on searching things up or really thinking about your choice. In this scenario, you're forced to use the System 1 method of thinking, when this decision really should have required System 2. You have to go by your gut instinct. Let's relate this into a game. If a gacha game gives you a flash sale deal where you can spend quite a lot of money for some in-game resources, but you don't actually know how valuable those resources are or they're worth the money at all. But, it's actually a limited time offer and it's going away in just 2 minutes. Well, now you have to make an impulsive and instinctive decision to buy it or not buy it.
Cookie Run Kingdom is really bad about this. This is, again, like specifically a mobile gacha game problem. And I think that there is a bit of difference between how mobile gachas and gachas that are trying to be more like proper video games work. And I think differentiating that is sort of important because lumping them all in together is not very accurate. But yeah, like mobile games do this shit all the time. It's really bad. Cookie Run Kingdom is the worst about this. It's really, really bad.
When we're under stress, we often don't have the luxury to think things through. And this is exactly what is being exploited. Now, this technique is nothing new in gaming, but used quite often by pushy salesmen, nudging you to sign a contract. I don't see this tactic being used very often in gacha games, but this is something I want to bring up. The next up is...
It is used in like the really shitty predatory. Like the less of a game the gacha game is and the more of a gacha the gacha game is, this is more of a thing. The more gamey it is, the less you see it. But it is very much in some gacha games, like 100%, like real bad.
FOMO. You've likely heard
FOMO.
of this term before. It stands for fear of missing out. Limited time events, cosmetics, characters, you name it. If you don't snag them now, they might not come back for a long time. If ever, even. Ideally, when I judge these games, a player should not feel left out or behind progression if they join late or are thinking of taking a break.
Yeah, I don't think there's a single gacha game that doesn't do that. I'm gonna be honest. I don't think there's a single gacha game on this planet that does not massively abuse FOMO and make you feel like you will be left behind if you don't log in. Festering Desire from Genshin Impact is a great example of that. But I think every gacha game definitely does a lot of FOMO shit, to be honest. And again, this is a live service, free-to-play game thing in general. It's worse sometimes in gacha games, but I think that making this a gacha only thing is a little bit odd to me. Just the nature of having characters that you can only get for X number of weeks and then they're gone until they're brought back at some point in the future that you don't know is inherently abusing fear of missing out stuff. 100%.
This is the reason I have a FOMO section in my reviews. I cannot in good faith support practices of having experiences or rewards locked behind time-limited events that don't come back. Especially if that event contains important
Genshin is one of the worst offenders of this. Thank you for acknowledging that.
Lore implications or very desirable items.
Genshin has so many lore things and weapons and important things locked behind fucking events. It is so bad. And then, oh my God. Do they still have it in Genshin where you can't get the item to level 10 talents unless you do the events regularly? Do they still have that or have they made that better? Oh my God. Yeah, the crowns. That just unlocked for me. Dude, it's still like that. Ew.
This is one of my biggest gripes with a lot of these games.
Yeah.
It is very predatory in nature, and I really hope this isn't common practice when people see the success of Genshin when they do this. The effects of FOMO elements should be apparent. They force you to monitor the game constantly to ensure no rewards or events are missed. You might not necessarily enjoy playing the game, but rather it will make you feel pretty bad if you missed out on something important.
I'll be honest, it doesn't even have to be that important. When I was playing Genshin, I missed the event where the first Sealy event, with the little blob guy that just follows you around, does fuck all. He's just a little cosmetic. I missed that Sealy event. And I remember frothing, waiting for a new Sealy event for months because I was so fucking mad that I didn't have a Sealy and I didn't have the drip of everybody who'd been playing before me, and it was awful. It doesn't even have to be that important. It could just be drip that other people have that I don't, that I'll still froth. Those guys, for me, drip is actually worse.
It's completely to the game's discretion if they want to rerun any past events or make past content permanently available.
Which they kind of usually don't. Not always, but it's unlikely.
Some do it well, and some not so well.
Yeah.
Now, something I want to bring up is that despite all these measures, getting someone to start an additional live service game is actually a very hard sell. Your time is limited. Everyone
True.
likely has existing responsibilities, such as school or work. Currently, you might play one or more gacha games. But how would you feel about adding one more to the pile? This year alone, we had Wuthering Waves launch, Triple Z and Azure Promelia coming later.
I'm so excited for Azure Promelia. Do we have a release date on that yet? I want to play Azure Promelia so fucking bad.
The question is, are you going to start playing any of these games? And are you even going to give them a shot? If you have no plans to start a new one or even try it, what's stopping you? And how will any of them market itself so that you would at least give them a try?
A lot of times, older gacha games I won't play because they're not very playable on PC, or I need to have some kind of emulator to play it on PC, and I don't like mobile gaming. If I can't play it on my PC with a relative amount of ease, I'm probably not, in fact, going to play it. The reason I played Cookie Run Kingdom was because the Google Play launcher existed, and I could just download it from Google Play so that I could play it on PC. But for me, the biggest thing is always going to be, if it's not on PC, for me, I'm not going to hunch over my phone playing a game. I don't like it. I want to play on my pooter. I don't want to play on my phone.
And conversely, how badly would any of the games you're currently playing mess up to make you not want to play it anymore? In the post-information age where live service games have reached full saturation, every shiny new title around the block is vying for your attention.
Right.
Players today have a lot of choices of what games they want to engage with. The major difference between your traditional live service games and gacha games is that gacha games are considered way more casual and does not require a large time sink versus something like Call of Duty. It's not unusual for one to advertise itself as a side game, one you can manage on your daily commute or morning routine and be done with in like 5 minutes. The traditional gacha game today have very short daily mission routines. It's way less stressful to manage if you add 5 minutes to your daily schedule. But even with such low maintenance, when you have to juggle and micromanage so many games, you'll have to make a choice. Which ones to continue and which ones do you drop? Due to a lot of these subtle practices with
or you could just be Cherry Moo and play every single gacha game known to man. You could just manage them all. Just play everything. Shit.
Retention and monetization, the choice can be quite difficult.
Yeah.
A subtle way to induce FOMO is through the 30-day supply system, which is now present in a lot of gacha games. From a cost-efficient perspective, it makes perfect sense for low spenders to gain a lot of value with very little fees. But there's just one problem. As you may have guessed, if you don't log in for a day, this can make you lose out on those precious rewards. The same for Battle Pass systems too. This idea ties to something called the sunk cost fallacy, and the natural human tendency to avoid losses, aka loss aversion. I mean, you've already committed so much time and money into something, it would be a shame to stop. This is a very strong motivator
I'll let him finish, actually. Let him finish, and then I'll have my joke. My bad.
To retain players. But
it's also a really great way to get people to white knight your game and pretend there are no problems because I spent all this money and all of this time. And so, like, obviously there's no flaws with the game. It's the perfect game. It's a perfect game. It's a perfect developer, and anybody who criticizes it should be shot on site. And it's great for that as well. There's a lot of benefits to that sunk cost fallacy.
You have a way to combat this. The sunk cost fallacy is exactly that, a fallacy. The main misconception here is that it doesn't matter what you do, you're not getting back the money you spent. For a real-life example, it's like if you bought a ticket to a concert, but right before the event, your friends invite you to go clubbing. You know that going clubbing with friends will be fun, but since you had already spent money on the concert ticket, you're more inclined to try that out instead, even if you may not enjoy it as much. After all, it will be a shame not to go. But this is just it. No matter what choice you pick here, the money spent on the ticket is gone. Just
don't value your money at all. Piss it out whenever you feel like it, and then abandon anything that you don't like anymore, and it'll be great. Put no value on your currency. It'll be good, I swear. Spend money completely mindlessly. Don't check your bank account. It'll be great, I swear.
No choice here will be to go clubbing instead, since you know that your time will be better spent. Unlike money that one can always make back, your time is invaluable. In most live service games, there is a starter pack that lets you spend a small amount of money for a big boost. This can be as little as $1 and is typically considered as your entry ticket, since once you justify spending even that minuscule amount, you're now invested in sunk cost. And it's way easier.
I feel like that's more of like a foot in the door, like you get in a little bit, you get in a lot kind of thing, than specifically sunk cost, because I feel like a lot of people can spend like $1 or $3 for those booster packs and it doesn't really matter. I think a lot more of it is that you get a big dopamine boost from spending a little bit of money and getting like probably a really big like cool thing. And so like the next time you're like, oh, I kind of really want that cool thing, you're going to be more willing to spend more money because you already know what the dopamine boost feels like, right? Because I think that the thing that is sort of missing from the analysis of a lot of these tactics is understanding like the brain chemistry that we're working with, because brain chemistry works approximately the same across everybody. The brain chemistry works the same for you and me and somebody across the world and somebody 500 years ago. And so the tactics are really effective. It's not going to work the same on everybody, but the brain chemistry is still there. Once you've experienced that big dopamine hit from spending that small amount of money and getting a big reward, spending more money and getting less reward feels more worth it because you already know that it feels really good.
For you to justify spending a bit more. Even if at the present time you don't enjoy the game too much, but since you know that you have invested money into it, you're more inclined to play it further. After all, it will be a shame to stop. Have you ever logged into a game you play every morning, did your dailies, and wondered, wait a minute, why am I doing this?
Yeah.
What would happen if I just didn't log in for the day?
Yeah, I did that with Genshin, and then I didn't log in, and then my life got way better after that.
When these retention systems are in place, it can almost make it feel like it has become part of your routine without thinking about it. This is habit building, and it is designed that way by nature. Here's my challenge to you. For tomorrow, just don't log in to any of the gacha games you play. Easy, right? Well, maybe at first, but try to think to yourself, what would you miss out if you didn't log in, and how bad would you feel about it? If you've been playing a game for long, it can be increasingly hard to quit. Because you're in so deep in terms of time and money invested, it would be such a waste to stop now.
Nah, I just want to play WUA because it's fun. I just want to I want to do my dailies because I like the game. And I wanna. That being said, for other games, there are definitely other gacha games that I played where I just kind of log in to do my chores, to do my duty, and then I log out, and I would keep doing it for that reason. And again, this is depending on the game and where you are at in like the dopamine cycle of that game. But I just want to play that Wuthering Waves. I don't have a problem. I just like it.
But let me suggest something that may change your perspective on this. Imagine the total amount of money you spent on a game as the total cost of a ticket used to go see a live show. Maybe you spend...
In Genshin, this is probably a low estimate, $7,000. I don't actually know what the number is. It's somewhere in that region. I don't know what it is, and I don't want to know, and I don't want to look it up, and I never want to find out. It's around $7,000. So it's a $7,000 ticket. Let's imagine in our head.
Nothing. Maybe you spend a couple hundred, 200, 1,000, and maybe even more.
69 for 20.
On the other hand, the total amount of time you spend playing the game is the duration of the live show itself. The show may have gone on for a week, a month, a year, maybe even more. It may have been a very expensive ticket, and it may have been a long show. But even the best of shows must come to an end. You got your money and
I agree, end Genshin now. Not the rage bait comment. And Genshin now! Close down the servers! They'll love it! It needs to be over! This is a joke. If you like playing Genshin, keep playing Genshin, whatever.
Time's worth. Now that the show is over, it's time to go home. You're leaving the theater feeling satisfied and content that you've seen such a good performance. This is how I could imagine how letting go of a game could look like. You never wasted any money or time, it was all worth it at the end, and you're ready to move on. There's a reason I say, thank you for watching, and as always, have fun with the game. As always, have fun with the game. Thank you for watching as always, and remember, have fun out there. I think with the growing nature of live service games, we often no longer play them because it's fun, but because we would feel left out if we didn't.
No, not for Wuthering Waves specifically. But yeah, for other ones, yeah. I stopped playing Cookie Run Kingdom kind of for that reason, actually. Because I got to a point in Cookie Run Kingdom where I was just logging in, and I had no chance of ever, like, progressing any further. Because ultimately, the end game in CRK is mostly just, like, the competitive shit. Like, ultimately, you kind of just needed to spend, like, a fuck ton of money to get any further in the competitive. Like, I would have had to spend hundreds of dollars to get any further in competitive in any reasonable amount of time. And that just like was not happening. And so I just quit. I was like, okay, well, I have now gotten all of my dopamine from this. Yippee!
All these predatory practices, I think often we forget why we play games in the first place. And it's to have fun.
It's to jerk my peanuts.
It's as simple as that. which means if you're not having fun with a game and are playing for FOMO, sunk cost, or just gambling tendencies, just stop playing.
This is
I am
true.
demanding you to stop playing games that you don't find fun.
Slay.
Hopefully with the lessons here today, I was able to better prepare you for any future games you may pick up and playing them more cautiously to not fall into any of these traps. After all, gacha games can be fun, but just never lose sight of why you play them. Thank you for watching, and as always, have fun out there.
Thank you. This was a really interesting video. I think it is a good thing to acknowledge a lot of the predatory tactics that are used in games. The things that were pointed out are true. They are tactics that keep you playing gacha games for sure. I think a lot of the reasonings for why he believed they worked were not the most accurate to science, because I think a lot of this does have to do with like dopamine type stuff and like dopamine, serotonin manipulating neurochemistry type things. But yeah, I like this video. I think it's good to, you know, keep people on their toes about these tactics. I think these are also tactics that are in basically any mobile live service game ever, any free-to-play game ever. To some extent, these tactics are used even in League of Legends, you know? So, like, I think it's good to be aware of them. I enjoyed listening to this. I really appreciate it. Let me know what you think in the comments down below on YouTube. I hope you have a good one. Come join us on Twitch if you ever have the time. We stream daily at twitch.tv/hex_juice. And I will see you on the next one. Bye-bye!